Today is Wednesday, April 10th, and we're doing Module 5, Lesson 3. And today's learning goal says I can compose and decompose rectangular prisms using layers. Let me tell you what that means. When you compose something, that's another way to say build. So another way to say this is I can build rectangular prisms. And the flip side, what do you think decompose means? Destroy or take apart. Okay, so I can build and take apart rectangular prisms using layers. Rectangular prisms are 3D figures where each face, or each side, is a rectangle. So we're going to be building and taking apart rectangular prisms using layers. We're going to be cutting them into different layers. Like here's one way to cut them into layers. How many layers does that have now? How many layers does that rectangular prism have now? How many? 3. 1 layer, 2 layers, 3 layers. There's lots of different ways. We also might consider cutting them into layers this way. How many layers does it have now? 2. Very good. We also might consider, cutting them into layers this way. Let's see. How many layers does it have now? 3. So you can see there's lots of different ways to think about layers. Okay? Very good. Eyes up here for a second. What is the volume of the structure you see here in yellow? I will tell you that each one of those unit cubes is 1 cubic centimeter. So what is the volume of the structure? Everyone?
4 cubic centimeters.
Okay, 4 cubic centimeters. Very good. Let me move this over here. Okay. What about this structure here?
8 cubic centimeters.
How do you know that this volume of this structure is 8 cubic centimeters? Talk to your table group. What I heard you say when you were talking to your table group members is you know that there are 4 blocks here, and there's another layer of 4 blocks, so 4 plus 4 must equal 8. Again, there's 4 blocks in the front here, and in the second layer there are also 4 blocks. How many layers are there in that structure? 2 layers. How many cubes are in each layer? 4. So 4 plus 4 is 8. Okay, let's use that same repeated reasoning to look at this one now. How many layers do you see here? 3 layers, right? We can see that it's been cut into, there's a yellow layer, there's a blue layer, and there's an orange layer. So how many layers are there all together? 3. How many blocks are in the yellow layer?
4.
How many blocks are in the blue layer?
4.
How many blocks are in the orange layer?
4.
So how many blocks are there all together?
12.
12. So what is the volume then of this structure? 12 cubic centimeters. Good. Okay, I'm going to show you the last picture, and I want you to use repeated reasoning. Use the same reasoning we used for the first structure, the second structure, and the third structure to explain to your partner. Don't just say what the volume is. Explain how you know using layers and the number of blocks that are in each layer. This time, how many layers do we have? 4 layers. There's a yellow layer, a blue layer, an orange layer, and a green layer, right? And in each layer, how many blocks do we have?
4.
There's 4 blocks in the yellow layer, 4 blocks in the blue layer, 4 blocks in the orange layer, and 4 blocks in the green layer. So what's 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4?
16.
So all together, how many blocks are there in this structure?
16.
So what's the volume? 16 cubic centimeters. For the first way, we can see we cut it into how many different layers for this one?
4.
There's 4 different layers, so we can show we cut it this way. There's 1 layer, there's 2 layers, there's 3 layers, and there's 4 layers. Do you guys see that? Okay. How many blocks are in each layer? 4. So I want you to write a 4 to show that there are 4 blocks in each layer. And this is how you can draw a drawing that shows that there are 4 layers. Oops. 4 layers. And there's 4 blocks in each layer. Okay? And therefore, how many blocks total are there? 16. And so what's the volume? 16 cubic centimeters. Okay? So do you see how you can literally decompose or cut your rectangular prism into 4 layers, and then you have to write this number 4. The number 4 tells you that there are 4 blocks in this layer, 4 blocks in this layer, 4 blocks in this layer, and 4 blocks in this layer. Make sense? Okay, let's use that repeated reasoning to show how we can cut it this way. Are we still cutting it like this, top to bottom? We're cutting it like a cake. We're layering the cake. So you can show that you're doing that by drawing your layers like that. Okay, do you see how now we're separating it into the blue layer on top and the orange layer on the bottom? How many layers are there total now? 2 layers. Okay, so on the side right there, there's 2 layers. How many blocks are there in each layer? How many blocks are there in the blue layer? 8 blocks. So we have to put an 8 here to show that there's 8 blocks in the top blue layer. How many blocks are there in the bottom orange layer?
8.
So let's also write that there's 8 down there. So there's 8 blocks in each. So if there's 2 layers, there's 8 in the top and there's 8 in the bottom. How many blocks are there all together? So what's the volume? 16 cubic centimeters. Very good. Okay, now let's use the same logic to cut it this way, the way Luke said to cut it. We're no longer cutting it from top to bottom. We're also not slicing it through the middle. How are we cutting it? There's a front layer and a back layer. Do you see that? So we're going to cut it this way. There's going to be a front layer and a back layer. There's the yellow layer in the back and the green layer in the front. How many blocks are in the front green layer?
8.
Okay, let's write an 8 to show that there's 8 in the front green layer. How many are in the back yellow layer?
8.
So let's put an 8 back there to show that there's 8 in the back. So each one you always have to write the number when you're cutting it to show how many blocks are in that layer. Okay? How many layers are there total?
2.
2 layers. How many blocks are there in each layer?
8 blocks.
8 blocks in each. So how many blocks altogether?
6.
What's the volume?
16.
So you can see that this is the same prism, isn't it? The top one is the same as the next one, which is the same as the bottom one. But what's different is how we're thinking about those different layers. And because it's the same, should it have the same volume each time? Should it? Yes, it's the same figure. Very good. As we know, one way we can chop something up is top to bottom. We could cut it like this. Do you agree? Yes? Okay, so if we did that, let's draw it on our blank one here. How many cuts would we make? How many cuts would we make? 3 to make how many different layers? Here's 1 layer, 2 layers, 3 layers, 4 layers. So we show it here, 1 layer, 2 layers, 3 layers, 4 layers. So for our first way, let's write in our chart that we have 4 layers. When we do that, how many blocks or cubes are in each layer?
6.
So we can write that there's 6 here, 6 here, 6 here, 6 here. Do you guys see it? 6 right here, 6 here, 6 here, and 6 here? So how many, let's add it to our chart. How many cubes are in each layer?
6.
So altogether, how many cubes do we have?
24.
So what's the volume of the prism?
24.
24 cubic centimeters. Good. I could also cut it horizontally like this. Do you guys agree? If I do that, that would look like this on my, when I show my work. Yes? If I do that, how many layers are there? 2. There's a top layer and a bottom layer. So on my chart, I'm going to add that there's 2 layers. Okay, if I look at this top layer, how many cubes are there in that layer? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I can show here, I must show here, if I don't, it's incomplete, that there's 12 in that one. So if there's 12 in the top layer, how many are there in the bottom layer?
12.
Okay, so what's the number of cubes in each layer? 12. If there's 2 layers of 12 cubes, how many cubes are there all together?
20.
What's the volume? 24 cubic centimeters. Very good. So we've cut it like this. We've also cut it like this. What's another way I could cut this prism? Show me with your hands. Okay, another way I could cut it is like this. Into forward, backward, and in this case there's middle, right? So I can show that by cutting it like this. 1, 2. Do you guys see that? If I do that, how many different layers are there? 3. There's a front one, a middle one, and a back one. Do you guys see that? Front one, middle one, and back one. So I can put on my chart that there's 3 layers. How many are in the front layer?
8.
Okay. How many are in the middle layer?
8.
Okay, and I can show that over here. How many are in the back layer?
8.
So there's 8 cubes in each layer. So how many cubes are there all together?
24.
What's the volume of the prism?
24 cubic
24 cubic centimeters.